Okay, so a lot of times people in New York City have, I would say, a different reality compared to their expectations of what they thought New York City was gonna be like. So in this video, I'm gonna explain to you the difference between what people think New York City is gonna be like compared to what it actually is like in real life. Now, the two are very, very different. I'm not trying to burst your bubble here, but there are a lot of things that people think they're gonna be glamorous in some type of way, but then when they actually get here to New York City, they're like, okay, reality sets in, and that is not what I expected it to be. Happens all the time. So the first thing that I want to talk about is apartments. Now, I think everyone before they're moving to New York City pictures themselves in like some glamorous, really cool apartment, like overlooking the city, and it's just gonna be like the best place ever. But that rarely really happens, especially if you're young and you're moving here and it's kind of like one of your first jobs that you're trying to get here in the city. People cannot afford a nice apartment. It is very, very, very rare that you find like a needle in a haystack apartment that is super nice in a great neighborhood that you want to be in, and it's all just like happy-go-lucky. It just never happens, to be honest. And I see it all the time. I have a lot of clients that are moving to New York City and they get really, really excited and they're like, okay, I can't wait to see apartments. And you gotta kind of warn them in advance, be like, okay, well, we're gonna look at all different types of places and neighborhoods that you wanted, and kind of getting their expectations to the right place. But it still doesn't always seem to work, unfortunately. Now, I just want you guys to understand that I'm a big believer, and I've said this in other videos, that I really think that the neighborhood is more important when you're moving to New York City rather than the actual physical apartment, because it's just gonna be temporary unless you're buying the place to be like a forever apartment, which pretty much no one is, especially when coming to New York City for the first time. So I really want you to focus more on the neighborhood and not the apartment. There's always gonna be time to your dream apartment down the line when you've made it in New York City. But right now, you just need to focus on being in the place you always wanted to be in. Okay, so the next topic is Friends. Now, I think that people literally think of the TV show Friends when they're always hanging out with their friends, never working, in a cool coffee shop, and also in their large, oversized apartments. And they kind of expect their life to just kind of be like that once they get here. But the apartments are much smaller and they don't have the friend group yet, which is totally fine. No one really does when they first come here. That's completely okay. But I really do think that people just think that everything's gonna fall into place when it comes to like their social life. When, in matter of fact, it actually takes a lot of work. Now, there are tons and tons of people that live in New York City. However, sometimes it can feel like the loneliest city in the world because you can't find your exact squad that you like wanna hang out with all the time, right? So I really do think that people think that because there's so many people that live here that they're gonna easily find these friends that they're gonna happen to get along with and everything's gonna work out great. But there's a lot of times where people are lonely for a while because they really haven't found their group yet. So I really think that the best way to handle this is, for one, if you have a roommate and they have friends or something like that, maybe you can try to kind of meet people through your roommate. That's always a good way. But it doesn't always work out like that, trust me. I know. It doesn't always work out like that. So I think that sometimes you have to just kind of take matters into your own hands and either go to meeting people at your job is definitely a way that a lot of people find like their friend group, friends of friends that they meet through work. But again, if that's also not something that you feel like is really gonna fit into your life, then it's really just meeting people through like common interest groups and things like that. Like you can go on Facebook, there's like a ton of Facebook groups for people that are like new to New York City and all these different meetups that are happening all the time. You could also do Bumble BFF, is honestly pretty big here, and a lot of people meet a lot of friends through there. I've been on it before and I've always had a good experience on it. So it isn't always easy to make friends right away, but at the same time, I don't want you to think you're alone because a lot of people go through it when they're first coming to New York City. So the bars and restaurants here in New York City are not always all that they're cracked up to be. Now there are some of the finest restaurants in New York City. That's definitely the case. That will never not be the case. But at the same time, it also doesn't mean that every restaurant in New York City is going to be amazing, because that is also definitely not the case. There are a lot of places that I cannot believe exist, not only in New York City, but in the whole world that I've been to in New York City. There are some crazy businesses, and there are some really not good places when it comes to bars and restaurants. And it's surprising too, because with so much competition in the area, you really wonder how these places survive without kind of like changing their ways, I guess I would say. But there are a lot of places that are not places that you'd want to bring your family to from back home, let's just say that. So I would say in order to find like good places like to eat, there's a couple good like sites, like Time Out New York is really good for like good recommendations. Secret NYC is another one that has a lot of like different restaurant lists and recommendations. In fact, Infatuation, New York City. That's one that is actually more food focused, so if you're looking for specific restaurant recommendations. And then Eater New York is also one that is definitely like kind of like high-end dining a little bit more, but they have a lot of really great recommendations as well. So money, always an interesting topic, because at a certain point in your career, if you work hard enough in whatever field you're in, most of the time you have the opportunity to make a lot of money in New York City. But when you're first getting to New York City, you have the opposite. You have most likely pretty much nothing. At least I had pretty much nothing. So I had such little money when I first started working in New York City for the first time that I think I knew literally where every $5 lunch spot was in Manhattan. Like, no joke. Like, I had a list, I had a running list because I had no money to eat. So times have changed because I don't think you can find $5 lunches in New York City anymore. I think like $10 lunches are the new $5 lunches, which is actually really sad. Inflation is sad. So at the same time, I was so frustrated because I was like, I was in the greatest city in the world, but I had no money. And it was also probably one of the most expensive cities in the world. I know there's a few more that are higher, but close enough. And I wanted to enjoy everything that the city had to offer, but also I had no money to do that. So there was a lot of catch-22 scenarios going on there. Like I said, the $5 lunches was something that I took advantage of. Now it's definitely gonna be closer to $10 lunches, if you can even find that. They're hard to find, but they do exist still. They definitely do exist. And then I took advantage of a lot of happy hours. And the one thing about New York City is that there are a ton of really, really great happy hours. You do have to do a little bit of digging online to figure out like which restaurants have them, which don't, because they're not as advertised, I would say. But at the same time, there's a lot of really good ones out there. So another website where you can take advantage of kind of like cheaper package, kind of like Groupon style, but not Groupon. Everybody knows Groupon. I know it's like everywhere in the world now. But one that's New York City specific is a website called Pulsed, and it's PULSD like .com or something like that. Just Google Pulsed without an E. So that website specifically has like Groupon style, like kind of like cool, trendy like restaurants or like theater performances for like, you know, the price. So if like you wanted to do like a date at like a restaurant that would be like meal for two plus a bottle of wine or something, like they might do that for like 40 or 50 bucks. Like they're actually really, really good deals. And I used to use them a lot. Like I actually discovered some really, really great restaurants from using the Pulsed website. So I really do recommend looking into that as well. Now, dating. Dating is one of those topics in New York City that depends on the day that you catch yourself talking about it, right? At least back when I was dating in New York City, that's how I felt. Sometimes you love it, and then other times you're like, oh my gosh, I'm never going to date anyone here again, right? It's just how life goes when you're dating, I guess. Honestly, it's probably like that in pretty much any city or town and across the world, but you really do feel it more, I feel like, here, because there's so many highs and lows when it comes to dating in New York City. There just really is. So I didn't use a lot of the apps in New York City, but I did use Tinder, and I did meet my husband on Tinder. So we did meet here in New York City on Tinder. So, I mean, that was some years back now. I know that Tinder's not all that it was cracked up to be back then. It probably wasn't even that great back then, but I didn't really know any other apps to go on. So I was just like, okay, this works. But all the apps are really popular here. And honestly, I feel like every day that goes by, less and less people meet in person in New York City. Like they meet like at a bar, like not like I'm meeting up a Tinder date at a bar or a Bumble date at the bar, like I'm meeting a person for the first time at the bar. I honestly feel like that happens less and less, which is very, very sad. But at the same time, I met my husband on an app, so I guess I can't complain. And if you are trying to actively date, I do encourage you to get out there and try to go on the apps, try to go to meetups or like go hang out with friends of friends of friends just to kind of like meet people. And honestly, you can just meet so many different types of people that I feel like dating is probably more interesting here than anywhere else. I guess I really don't have any other comparisons besides Connecticut because I'm from Connecticut, so I'm sure dating isn't as exciting in Connecticut as it is in New York City. At least it didn't feel so to me. But it is more fun to date in New York City just because you really never know who you're gonna meet. There's a lot of pros and cons in New York City. If you guys watch my videos, I know that you know that already, and hopefully your expectations are met here when you get to New York City. But at the same time, I do want you guys to understand that there are a lot of things that are really glamorized in movies, TV shows, Instagram and TikTok. Like there's so much that's glamorized there. And there's a lot that when you get here, you might be a little bit disappointed or be like, wait a second, this is not what I imagined it to be. And that's okay. Everyone goes through that. So I don't think there's really anything wrong with that. I just want you to know that sometimes like you don't have to lower your expectations, but at the same time, not everything is what it's cracked up to be.